The best experience of my life was seeing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse for the first time in theaters. There you have it. Okay, no, I'm just messing with you guys. Let's try this again. Having a brain and being young, I never understood movies like Toy Story, Kung Fu Panda, Shrek, or WALL-E when I was like 3 or 4 years old. However, that doesn't change the fact watching them simply blew my adolescent skull away due to the magic of animation. During this era, CGI and animation were heavily utilized in the movie industry with green screens, motion capture, and previs. Because of this, superhero TV shows like Spider-Man helped establish the foundation for later shows like X-Men, Batman, and the Avengers, as well as the superhero genre as a whole. As the pendulum shifts into a new era, more recent superhero movies start to fall short, and this becomes an issue. The quality of movies today is no better than it was in the past. These mid-tier films and series have begun to deteriorate and have taken a tremendous amount of time and money to produce, oversaturating what created them and demonstrating that they are no longer as creative and gratifying as they were when we were younger. Instead, it's all nostalgia gimmicks and character exposition that is either weak or underdeveloped in some ways. There aren't any risks to changing the superhero formula or trying something original. As a result, they take it easy and pray for the best. Until Sony made a choice that would change everything. Sony sought fresh ways to expand the franchise and its lead character with the release of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, starring Andrew Garfield. The movie bombed upon release, leaving Sony in a mess and forcing them to reevaluate their strategies. Although they would later work with Marvel Studios on Spider-Man, they would initially be unable to produce standalone Spidey movies, so they would retaliate and decide to make an animated film for the web slinger. It would be a unique and fascinating idea to bring an animated version of Spider-Man to the big screen, considering that the animated character has only been portrayed in TV shows in the past. To see that Sony would give more budget for a film would be a game changer. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, a team who gained notoriety for their work on 21 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, The Lego Movie, and the Clone High TV series, were acquired by Sony in 2015. They were offered the fantastic opportunity to make their Spider-Man movie. The quality, care, and compassion and heart that went into their earlier work are evident in their current productions. These components would be the foundation in shaping the movie and rely on Dan Slott's Spider-Verse storyline from the comics, except they would make an original story borrowing from those ideas as inspiration. The next idea was to create a brand new narrative in which Peter Parker, who had already been viewed about 1 billion times, was not the main character. They would choose Miles Morales and set themselves apart from what we knew about Peter's origins and now learning about Miles. Plus, the story made it easier for Lord and Miller to create a continuity that doesn't interfere with the MCU, giving them free reign for their universe. The crew immediately got to work on writing their screenplay. After establishing the idea for the script, they penned a 3-hour screenplay that was filled with innumerable details and ideas they had just had. They carefully planned and cut their final draft to create the movie that we now know. The next phase would introduce the animation. As the production designer employed by Sony, Alberto Mielgo's responsibility was to identify and oversee the film's style. His ideas for the sequence came to life during the screen test and had a serious tone that would carry over to the finished film. Mielgo also ended up being the one to deviate from the norm, as many movies have been doing for a while. He said that recently animated films have come to resemble one another so much it would be difficult to identify them differently. Mielgo decided the only way to change it was to start from scratch because he wanted to produce a comic book style, examining the background, the action, and the settings that influenced Spider-Man's recognizable appearance. What better approach to finding it than to seek the source material? Thankfully, Sony loved it and provided enough resources for Mielgo's new art direction. They were hiring artists, technicians, animators, and 3D modelers. The crew formally cooked for the ideal artistic appearance for the following 2 years, except for one issue: animating it. The process was so excruciatingly long for this 2-second scene right here. It took the team months to animate it. After some time had passed, Sony fired Mielgo for unexplained reasons, which was a peculiar development. Mielgo believed it had something to do with creative differences, with how grounded his art style looked and Sony wanting a more cartoon visual style. It was an odd choice for which there was no explanation, and it would now alter the animation's progress in the following stages. So the pre-production team that Mielgo hired would stay, while the new second team, led by Justin K. Thompson, would work on the rest. They had to come up with a technique and use tools that would enable them to animate in the comic book style effectively. Nevertheless, the team continued to draw inspiration from Mielgo's work to help push them forward. and encouraged the new crew to employ their distinctive styles and incorporate them into the film. The reality was that this was ultimately a team effort, and the film would allow so many different artists to work on the movie for every scene, character, and art style while using Miego's incredible work as an influence moving forward to finish what he started. The results spoke for themselves as the team had captured the comic book essence and brought it to life. Every shot resembled a scene from the comic book, thanks to the use of vibrant digital colors, onomatopoeias, smears, wipes, duplicating limbs to give the impression of fast motion, and many other nuances. Now it's time for me to break into a hearty gush, because this movie is stunning and profound, and it made me reevaluate how becoming Spider-Man can alter your perspective on life. After losing his uncle, taking care of his aunt, and putting his trust in Harry and Mary Jane, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man showed us the type of responsibility he has, the people he lost to rescue New York, and the ones he loves. It was overwhelming, but it offers enough information to understand his Spider-Man. Miles Morales has a caring family and he's an intelligent and upbeat kid, but he goes through a point in life that many people go through: expectations. As he ventures his passion for art and creativity, he falls in line with the responsibility that his family wants what's best for him, giving him very few options. This might annoy us as children because it makes us feel obligated to conform rather than feel free to be ourselves. Miles isn't lazy or unappreciative in my opinion, he just doesn't like the pressure of having to pretend to be someone he's not, and not wanting to disappoint others. He desires to flee to experience some independence, without the constant need for higher grades, dealing with his parents' overprotectiveness, hey pretty girl, and not having a choice in his life. He needs a sanctuary, a place to drop his guard and be himself. To help Miles be himself, Uncle Aaron steps in, a more relaxed, compassionate, laid-back mentor and trustworthy person. In contrast to have a harsh and embarrassing father who is also a police officer and thinks what he's doing for Miles is for the best and having a better future. Although his father's perspective isn't wholly incorrect, Miles believes that his father is establishing an expectation that isn't in line with what he wants to pursue. While his father is serious about what Miles should do and recognize his potential for something far better, but in a way more tough love that Miles isn't comfortable with, and occasionally distances the two. His uncle provides Miles with more comfort in his life that encourages him. Uncle Aaron made it easy and beneficial to learn from someone who supports your abilities and believes in your potential, until Miles experiences a similar journey as Peter Parker up until the moment he is bitten by a radioactive spider that alters everything. Miles wasn't prepared for this decision though. Peter Parker, on the other hand, was aware of this but recognized the difficulty it might present. Another Spider-Man is something fresh to him. The fact that this kid suddenly needs him, though this may indicate something significant. But it would have to wait while Kingpin was developing a machine that could open a dimension during this conversation. Before it could get any worse, Spider-Man tries to stop the machine called the Collider. While facing each enemy, he learns what Kingpin was doing and deactivates the Collider before it's too late. Once it has been temporarily disabled, Peter, who is now injured, nominates Miles to use a kill switch device to keep it secure and permanently disrupt the ambitions of the Kingpin before he takes the entirety of New York with him. Kingpin then resolves to strike Peter out of rage. Sadly, Miles would witness Spider-Man's demise. I felt for Miles as he grew more overwhelmed and terrified of the moments he endured throughout the movie. He never felt so vulnerable with the risk of losing his family, being unable to save New York, and losing Spider-Man. Unless there was hope. Peter B. Parker was hauled up along with 4 other Spider people who were present when the crash occurred. Gwen Stacy as Spider-Woman, Spider-Ham, Spider-Noir, and Penny Parker. It was up to Miles to return them home and save his universe altogether. But is he ready?
When you think you can, keep going.
Come on, Miles. You can do it.
He needed space, and who better to provide it than the guy he trusts? The effort was too overwhelming, and trying to prove himself to anyone wasn't going as planned. But even that wasn't going to happen.
You know me, sir.
The person he respects, the one he believes in, the one he loves, he needed help. Along with the others, the villains find Miles and a fight breaks out. Miles is then challenged by Prowler, whom he couldn't face in this situation, but what can he do? Suddenly,
Miles?
Miles' loss of the role model he most admired caused him to go through this painful event. Kingpin must pay. It would be challenging for Miles to accept that Peter doesn't think he's prepared, despite defending him on his method. In the end, he completely owns Miles and delivers the rawest line in the film.
When will I know I'm ready?
You won't. It's a leap of faith.
Miles is then greeted by his father, who informs him of the news regarding his brother, and is honest with him. The sequence established Miles' ability and potential to act morally. It also reveals how devotedly his father loves him and how he doesn't want to lose Miles. How he believes he has what it takes. Okay, let's do this one more time. Now prepared to accept his role as the future Spider-Man, now proving to himself and to everyone that he is ready, taking down each villain and saving New York, his new friends, and his family, moving forward just like Uncle Aaron had told him. This is Spider-Man. Even though I've already talked a lot about Miles in terms of the plot, I also wanted to mention his remarkable tenacity, which is praised throughout the movie even though he manages to capitalize on his unique sense of style. It was amazing and fascinating to experience the journey from his perspective and the obstacles he faced. I can relate to his resentment and frustration at the world for taking his uncle from him, as well as the lack of courage. However, I was delighted for him to succeed, take the risk necessary to realize his full potential, and reject society's expectation of who he should be, accepting his duty as the next Spider-Man while learning about himself in the world. Miles is also a great influence on other characters. He helps people see another perspective that he expresses or shows to them. Topped with his creativity, his humor, his brilliance, and flaws, people see Miles for who he truly is and what he takes into consideration. I appreciate how Miles learns and applies what he experiences in a brief time, as the writers and animators use these small but significant moments to highlight. He shares Peter, Gwen, and the others' understanding of how Spider-Man operates in his unique way. That's always something I admire about Spider-Man as a whole. Anyone can be Spider-Man and have their own take as the hero. Anybody could do that. Peter Parker doesn't always have to. Miles uses that instance to illustrate his entire case. Speaking of Peter, the other Peter we got is much older, disheveled, but has Spider-Man experience, which is funny to see since we don't get to see this type of Spidey in the comics nowadays. Peter B. Parker has been in such a rough state in his dimension, and it's the most relatable type of Spider-Man I've ever watched. I cherish him a lot because he shows the side of Spidey who has battled and struggled in the most trying circumstances. Seeing him as an adult who is unsure of whether he is ready to start a family is perhaps the scariest position he has yet to confront. Meeting Miles alters the course of this entire scenario. Of course, Pete doesn't believe he's prepared to deal with MJ once more in his world, or begin a family knowing nothing about raising children and doubting whether he's still a good spouse. However, with Miles, we see how this directly changes him over time, and while watching this moment, it felt so beautiful to see this. After all, as you watch it, and Miles challenges Pete to stay behind, he doesn't take no for an answer. Pete could have said anything else that would have turned this into a superhero cliche, like "I know what I'm doing" or "I told you no for a reason." But he says something that impacts me and catches me off guard.
Most people I meet in the workplace try to kill me, so you're a nice change of pace.
While he doesn't exclude Miles, he was grateful that someone was watching out for him, and was prepared to go above and beyond to support Pete rather than thwart him. I had the impression that at this point, Pete started to appreciate Miles for who he is and what he might develop into as Spider-Man. I adore how they interact with one another as they share these hilarious and touching moments. It makes me wonder what Peter and Miles' relationship would have been like in the beginning, but I can at least appreciate the kinship that they share as superheroes and as individuals. While Pete offers and accepts Miles his advice, which gives him the self-assurance he needs to go back home and take the risk. Gwen Stacy, or Spider-Woman, or Gwanda. This version of Gwen appeals to me because it supports my claim that anyone can wear the mask. Gwen is considerably more chill, and she blends her skills with her love of music and dancing. She is different in that she lost her best friend in her realm as Spider-Woman. As a result of the unsuitable circumstances surrounding her friend's death, she has become more reclusive and avoids forming relationships out of fear of losing someone as well. But that also changes for her when she meets Miles. It wasn't a great impression at first, but it managed to seep through with their goal to stop the Collider and slowly develop that friendship that Gwen was afraid of doing again. See where I'm going with this? And it wasn't because Miles had his Spider-Man powers, it was primarily due to him being himself, and it started to grow on her. I liked her character, and it's amazing how the writers worked supporting characters into the narrative so well. Regarding Spider-Noir, Spider-Ham, and Penny Parker, I thought they were fantastic. I adored every style that they were able to skew with each of them and their respective universes. They made such an impression since you only learn a tiny bit about them, yet grasp their complete histories. Observing what they each add to the story and how they support Miles during his darkest or most difficult time, when he lost his uncle. How others see he is not alone, show empathy for him, comprehend the severe anguish of loss. The hardest aspect of being Spider-Man is always having to deal with the knowledge that you can't save everyone. It's amazing how Lord and Miller were able to incorporate these various visual techniques while making the scenes flow so naturally. Aunt May was wonderful to watch in this movie since she was willing to assist Miles and had to deal with Peter's death. I was pleased to see Aunt May doing well even after those trying times because she was very accepting and cared for her nephew a great deal. Kingpin's appearance in this movie came as a huge surprise, no pun intended, and transforms the way Spider-Man typically interacts with his foes. While various villains appear in this film, they were designed to be closer to Miles' dimension than their more familiar counterparts. Kingpin's motivations also made sense given his temperament, as he will do whatever it takes to reunite with his family. I genuinely appreciate the time they spent on Kingpin's character as the antagonist. Even though the film deals with many different characters and themes, the movie quietly foreshadows Olivia Octavius' appearance and her role in the entire thing, making her the coolest threat and the craziest reveal we've seen from her character. She looked amazing with her subtle nods to her identity and the actual outfit she uses to stop Spider-Man. Overall, the movie does an excellent job setting up both what is happening and what will happen next. A style of animation that everyone is drawing inspiration from emerged as the result of the time and effort that was put into it. Another explanation for why this movie is great is because it has inspired other movie studios to experiment with the animation and take chances, demonstrating innovative techniques that set themselves apart from what Disney hasn't modified yet. Depending on what kind of narrative the creators are going for, not everything has to look realistic, but instead it can look artistic. I'm interested to see how this will continue to influence animated movies going forward, given that the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Puss in Boots, and many others are already doing it, inviting the audience on a fantastic adventure as well. There are plans for Across the Spider-Verse, so don't worry, soon we'll see how this will all turn out.